Pokemon is maybe my favorite franchise of all time, or if you catch me on a day I'm thinking about Zelda, top 3 at least. I've got a storied past with the franchise. Like many people around my age, it's something we've grown up with. Even if you aren't still into the games, or if you never were, the sheer cultural weight the franchise carries is enough that everyone, even my parents, know who, at the absolute minimum, Pikachu is. Pokemon, of course, transcends just a video game franchise. It's an anime, a trading card game, a line of merchandise that can justify multiple stores dedicated to it all across Japan. This isn't all that surprising though. By a pretty wide margin, it's the highest grossing media franchise of all time. And that's what makes the handling of the mainline series of games so frustrating. For the record, going into this video, I don't think the games are bad, just disappointing. And I'm going to discuss how it all started, where it's at now, and the road between that gets to the heart of the problems with Pokemon. Before we get into it though, I'd like to point out that this is going to be focused on the main series of games, from Red and Blue to Sword and Shield. I won't be going into depth of things like Mystery Dungeon or Snap, so please keep that in mind. Since the release of Red and Blue in 1996, the core series of games have not gone more than 2 years without an entry, either in the form of a new release, remake, or special edition of that current generation. Since inception, Pokemon has always been within relevance of the gaming cultural landscape, making its home on handheld consoles in the midpoint of the Game Boy's lifecycle, and quickly elevated to an absolute must-own status. It's an undeniable powerhouse. So, like all great stories, let's take this one back to the very beginning, before it all began. As a child growing up in the 70s, obsessed with Space Invaders and bug collecting in Tokyo, Satoshi Tajiri concerned his parents with his shy nature and unwillingness to budge on what he loved. Later, in 1983, he penned a gaming fan magazine illustrated by Ken Sugimori under the name Game Freak. The zine offered tips and tricks on how to beat various different games, selling fairly well for a home-printed publication, and even eventually bringing staff on board to help with the workload they were generating. But then, in 1989, Nintendo did something big that would shake up Game Freak's direction entirely. They released the Game Boy on April 21st. 5 days later, on April 26th, Game Freak pivoted to becoming a development studio using the limited money they had from a mildly successful fanzine to make that shift happen. After taking a risk on their first game, Mendel Palace, Nintendo offered Game Freak the rights to develop their own puzzle game Yoshi in 1991 simultaneously for NES and the Game Boy. Used as the means to cut their teeth further on game design, both of these games helped Tajiri learn the basics of game difficulty scaling. Nintendo garnered enough faith in the small company to back their big RPG project, Capsule Monsters. Inspired by his lost love of bug collecting and watching old episodes of the Kaiju series Ultra 7, where the hero used monsters stored in capsules issuing them commands when he was unable to transform into the titular hero. Almost all of the ingredients were there to make something amazing. All they needed then was to realize the potential of the underutilized link cable for the Game Boy system. When the Game Boy first released, it was with this weird little cable that connected two systems. It had a very limited use. Games like Tetris and F1 Raced used it for competitive battles, but outside of that, it felt like a gimmicky add-on. Satoshi had realized the cable wasn't just a good idea for battles, instead envisioning monsters crawling through the wires like bugs from player to player. With a few more games behind them for the financial backing of the biggest game publisher in the industry, and an idea that was as good as bottled lightning, Tajiri and Sugimori grabbed their small development team and got to work. It's easy to see with even a cursory glance of the design document for Capsule Monsters, translated by Glitterberry on their website, that their idea far exceeded the limitations of what the original Game Boy was capable of. 200 originally planned Pokemon, a charisma system for the hero to gain favor with Pokemon, and illusory dragons that players needed to trade items with other players in order to get them all. So it's no surprise then that with the 2020 vision of hindsight, these original games feel more than a little hard to go back to. Let me explain. I, like many other people born in the late 80s and early 90s, loved the original generation of Pokemon dearly. The first run of 151 Pokemon are so nostalgic, it's hard to pry the Pokemon Company's ideas and branding away from it. Even rewatching Detective Pikachu again recently, it's hard not to notice just how Gen 1 dominated the Pokemon in the spotlight are, with everything else taking somewhat of a backseat. So it's very clear that there was, and still is, a lot of love for them. That said, due to excessive overscoping for a game that was meant to be more RPG-like and contained to a single cartridge, the things that got cut out in the process of scaling down may not have been the correct choices. I don't think we ever could have known what was missing or what would have been needed if sequels didn't iterate and add quality of life choices to the formula eventually. But things like experience only being visible in menus, status effects overriding levels, and overworld sprites being generic rather than specific are all signs of pushing Game Boy cartridges to its absolute limit. So having some missing or scuffed features may look jank in hindsight, it was a winning enough formula at its time to still be a smash hit. In fact, despite being listed as a producer, Miyamoto only claims credit for a few things within Pokemon's initial development, splitting the games into 2 separate versions, helping to incentivize trading, proposing Pokemon Stadium, giving Tajiri insight into 3D Pokemon models, and, most importantly, convincing Nintendo to increase cartridge sizes to accommodate the development, allowing up to 151 Pokemon. Our first experiences with a franchise are often the ones we cherish the most. Even if the series is new, those memories can be powerful if the games have enough in them to create moments that will stick with us forever. The first time Link becomes an adult in Ocarina of Time, the first time you hear Snake Eater as you climb the ladder in MGS3, or stepping out into Cyrodiil for the first time in Oblivion. Of course, all of these moments are scripted, OOTs in Oblivion serving as hooks into their respective worlds, and MGS3's acting almost as a reward for making it to that part of the game. Pokemon, especially at time of release in 1996, offered something new for a lot of gamers. More importantly, for a younger audience that may not have had the opportunity with more mature games like Chrono Trigger or Dragon Quest. And that was the chance to make your own moments. Even from the outset of Red, Blue, and Green, you're given the option to pick a starter, really showing players just how important team building and bonding is going to be moving forward. This connection to our teams plays such an important role to the connection we've all formed to the series. My entrance to the series was on my 10th birthday. I was given a copy of Pokemon Yellow with a Pokemon Game Boy and the first few episodes of the show on VHS. Watching the protagonist of the anime, Ash, turn 10 and start his adventure right as I was beginning mine, both with Pikachu in tow, is something that is going to stick with me forever. It was so special, and I know I'm not alone in this, or at least something similar to a lot of people, even for kids today. More than just a game, Pokemon started a movement. It got kids all around the world, and in every generation, talking, trading, and becoming friends, or enemies depending on if you battled or not. It instilled rivalries akin to those seen between Ash and Gary, Red and Blue, Brendan and May. What's made Pokemon stay strong through the years is the designs of the monsters. Pokemon designs are so simple, yet each one has value and potential to be iconic. There's a reason if you put 10 Pokemon fans in a room, chances are none of them will have the same favorite. This really speaks to Sugimori's design philosophy on making simple and easily identifiable partners for players to capture, and for every clone and competitor that has come out since, the magic just hasn't been recaptured. Not to say these games have badly designed creatures, they just don't have that same early Sugimori feel to them. And while he may not design every new Pokemon that comes out these days, he still has the final say on any monsters that are set to be released. The main thing that really helps Pokemon stick out is they were never designed to be creatures specifically for battle or collecting. Each of the first 200 at the very least were created with the intention of helping the humans of the world as partners rather than pets, which can be seen in early Pokemon like Lapras, Machop, Rhydon, and so on in-game and in official artworks, doing everyday things alongside people of the world. Even if you were to look back at the sprites used in 1996 on the original Game Boy, they may look goofy in retrospect. Every single one of the 151 have something identifiable about them. Something about them that any given person can point to and say, this is my favorite Pokemon. Games, especially RPGs as simple as Pokemon, really hinge on their character designs, and through 8 generations and 898 total Pokemon to date, not including alternate forms like Mega Evolutions or regional variants, it's impressive that there are still new monsters coming out to this day I can look at and say has the potential to be a new favorite of mine. Each generation drip feeds varying amounts of creatures. Gen 2 added 100 more, around 50 of which were designed to be in the base games, that had to be left out, which may add to their legitimacy to old heads of the franchise who swear by Gen 1. The last time we saw a triple-digit addition to the Pokédex was Generation 5's Black and White. Black and White did something truly ambitious with its regional dex for the Unova region. It had an all-new only dex. Completing the game was the only way to find your old favorites. This was a gigantic feat that really shook the community and honestly took a while for most people to come around on. It only feels like recently, as the generation who had the 5th as their first foray into Pokemon are now old enough to be having a dominant presence in the conversation for most to realize it was one of the best entries in the entire series. I commend Game Freak for this step to move away from series staples like Pikachu, Eevee, Charizard, Gardevoir, Lucario, and so on to let a fresh, new batch carve their name into the cement. Not all of them landed well. The Vanillite and Trubbish lines don't really get much respect, but as a whole, Black and White is incredibly well remembered for a lot of reasons, and one of them was this drastic shift forcing players to try out new partners, but not everything is without its pushbacks and drama. This is where I might say something extremely controversial, but stick with me. Without a doubt, the biggest controversy surrounding Pokemon Sword and Shield was the discontinuation of the National Dex. For those of you that somehow missed it, the National Dex is every single Pokemon that has ever existed up to that point in the series. The problem people had with Sword and Shield was, it only has a regional dex. I can say this with the hindsight of 18 years and multiple generations since, but the National Dex should have been cut when the franchise was rebooted at Ruby and Sapphire. The National Dex makes sense in Gold, Silver, and Crystal. You physically go from Johto to Kanto to capture even more Pokemon not found within the former region. The scaling of new Pokemon added over the years has led to an insurmountable problem for Game Freak that addressing much later has proven to be problematic, as the technology switch from handheld to home console came around, creating all new models and animations for not only fresh additions but old favorites came in. It was a massive problem with Scope that only had one feasible solution: cut down the amount of Pokemon. If this had happened back in Generation 3, it'd be expected. We wouldn't have this backlash, and seeing who makes the cut each generation could be a fun thing to anticipate. Which creature makes sense for this region's geography and climate? With regards to designs, unfortunately humans don't really have the same treatment as their partners. Most characters are incredibly flat, having one personality trait they latch onto and use that as their entire motivations. As with many old JRPGs, we're met with a silent player avatar, which is honestly fine. It helps lend to the idea that this is your story with your partners, rather than someone else's adventure that you just happen to be controlling. As technology evolved, so did the gender options in Crystal, as well as the ability to customize outfits and even pick skin tones in X and Y, something that has remained a staple since. The problem with human characters lies in almost everyone else. There are a few exceptions as with every good rule, but generally they're well drawn and poorly written. Like everything that works about Pokemon, the story is incredibly simple. At the age of 10, you're entrusted with your starter Pokemon to be your main partner, a Pokedex to fill, 8 gym badges to collect, and a gauntlet of 5 bosses to take down in the Elite Four and Champion respectively. And that's kind of it. There's a rival who will check in on you occasionally, and their personality ranges from arrogant dick to whiny nuisance to just kind of there, and a criminal organization that does either petty crimes or try to destroy the world. This is where Black and White stands out again. It kept all of these ideas intact. The starter, the rival, the criminal org, but instead of changing anything drastically, each became fleshed out, and each part intertwined with the next. Before gym leaders were boss battles that unlocked HMs to use and a higher level cap to attain. Now they were actual characters in the world that helped you along your journey as you stopped Team Plasma and their leader N, as they try to liberate all Pokemon from the shackles of their trainers. It's not deep or complicated, but it adds stakes and weight to everything that happens. Now the gym leaders see your potential and want to help you get better, even getting involved in the final confrontation. These ideas snowballed from X and Y and eventually came to a head 2 generations later with Sun and Moon. Generation 7 is rough. It feels like a weird complaint, but it has too much of a focus on story, characters, and the world. Normally, I would welcome a change like this, especially to something as formulaic as Pokemon, but these things just aren't interesting. My biggest personal gripe is with the assistant character Lily. Like I said, Pokemon focuses on a silent player character, who wordlessly fights battles, leaving players to fill in the dialogue gaps themselves. Usually with rivals, they will run ahead and meet you at a destination to drop some exposition or hints for you, but in Sun and Moon, Lily changes all of this. The central story isn't about you, it's about her. It creates this disconnect where everything interesting in the plot never happens to your avatar, you just happen to be a bystander who battles on her behalf because her one personality trait is that she hates battling. From the opening cutscene of Sun and Moon, it's clear this isn't about you, since it's showing events with Lily that happened 3 months prior to the beginning of the game. It's a commendable step to make a big story happen within the Alola region, but ultimately the writing and characters don't carry it through all the stopping the game likes to do. Which brings me to... I don't know if this counts as a hot take or not, but Pokemon's core combat loop remaining mostly unchanged for its entire life cycle is something I love about the series. We have seen the addition of different battle and element types, changes to in-battle Pokemon, and so on, but they are just that, additions. With one small exception, the damage category for moves. Splitting them between special or physical to help a Pokemon's viability with certain moves was a good change and added a lot of depth in team compositions for both casual and competitive play. The basic rock, paper, scissors turn-based combat has stayed mostly the same though. If I hadn't kept playing Pokemon through each generation, I'm confident I still could show a new player the ropes regardless of the time passed with my first playthrough of Yellow. So when I say gameplay is the problem, I don't mean the core loop of battling. It's everything surrounding it. One of the most contentious mechanics found ingrained in the series was hidden machines or HMs. Valuable moves introduced at the onset of the series, whose usefulness is found more outside of battle than in. Surf to traverse bodies of water, fly to fast travel to any city, strength to push boulders, and so on, which were needed to progress through areas. I understand the need for this to some extent. It forced party variety, gated progress in ways that weren't just people standing guard, and even added some puzzles, like those seen in Seafoam Islands or Victory Road. The issues arise from the fact that once given to a Pokemon, they are unable to forget it. Or at least in Red, Blue, Green, and Yellow, they were not. In Gold and Silver, the move deleter was introduced. This was not for the benefit of players, however. It was so Pokemon could be transferred out of game back to Generation 1 via the time capsule system. Even though it's fixed now, the HM showed a fundamental problem with Pokemon. It band-aids its issues rather than fixes them. This covering holes as they appear has led to a very stale feeling within the Pokemon franchise. But what is it that feels stale? While the HM issue did get solved with Sun and Moon, that was 7 generations later. It took 6 mainline games, 5 special editions, and 3 remakes for Game Freak to finally step in and fix something players have always complained about. Mandatory moves taking up one of the 4 precious move slots on Pokemon. Sometimes more, sometimes a dedicated Pokemon like Barrel from Gen 4 would have 4 HM moves on it, taking up a party slot just for progression. The same can be said for mandatory tutorials. It took until Generation 8 for the dreaded How to Catch Pokemon sequence to finally become skippable. That's an extra 2 games after the last major fix. Quality of life changes are usually a welcome thing in any franchise, and Pokemon is no exception. It's the slowness at which these changes are implemented that has made it feel like the series has moved at a glacial pace because, well, it has. And I feel it's not productive to blame the teams working on each game. It feels like corporate meddling to keep the series as in line with itself as much as possible, but that's just speculation on my part. Pokemon is huge. I can say it's the biggest media franchise in the world worth over $100 billion, but that doesn't put a scale on things. To really put it into perspective, let's look at it like this. If you combined the value of Mario, Zelda, and Donkey Kong, Nintendo's highest valued in-house properties, you'd have almost enough for half of Pokemon. So the idea of changing things too much is scary to a corporate entity as big as the Pokemon company. Sun and Moon felt like all the over-tutorialization came to a head. On my most recent playthrough, it took 45 minutes to get the full Rotom Dex, the main item required to catch them all, as the tagline says. This wasn't 45 minutes of meandering around either. I followed the story trail, did a few battles with trainers and wild Pokemon as intended, but this really sets the pace of the game. For context, in that amount of time in each previous game, you will have at least your first Gym badge, if not be further along. After the Pokédex collection, you're forced into a series of battles to teach you the basic mechanics of the series. I understand the need for this. Pokemon has added a lot of things over the years, and it does skew towards a younger audience. That said, games are always better learned through showing and not telling. If you show these mechanics spread out and not all at once, players will learn what they mean. Even young kids. And a lot of these things outside of type matchups aren't really required for completing the game on a casual run. They just enhance your party and add value to metas for post-game battles. I know I have given Sun and Moon a hard time in this video, and if it's your favorite in the series, that's great. I don't want to take that away from you, but instead to highlight how it's the amalgamation of the problems seen within Pokemon, even though it did try to fix some of them itself. People are complaining that Pokemon feels stale, and I agree. So when Sun and Moon removed gym battles in place of island challenges, players rejoiced. This was the change we had been waiting for. This is how you fix Pokemon. Except it wasn't. Battling in and of itself isn't the issue. If it was, the series wouldn't be selling gangbusters still to this day. So having a different approach to how you battle was refreshing, but it wasn't a shake-up. It was a sidestep. No better or worse, just different. So then, what's the issue? What is the big thing preventing players from feeling like the series is truly moving forward and evolving with its fanbase? Well, to put it simply, difficulty might be the most contentious issue plaguing all of Pokémon, even more so than the National Dex debacle. While it was pitched and released as kind of my first RPG for a younger audience with Gen 1, as time has gone on, all of the missing quality of life decisions have made them age in a way that gives them a sense of inflated difficulty. But I don't think Gen 1, or even 2 for that matter, are hard in retrospect. They're just tedious. Pushing blocks around tunnels one tile then accidentally pushing it in the wrong direction isn't hard, it's just annoying and a waste of time. The curve of Pokemon is where a lot of the exhaustion lies within the community. Something that people give a lot of credit to Gen 1 for is the idea of hidden difficulty within choosing a Startermon. With the first two gyms being rock and water type respectively, any player who picked Bulbasaur, the grass starter, had an inherent type advantage over these gyms, while anyone who picked Charmander had a significant disadvantage. This has been touted as good hidden difficulty in an RPG, but with areas that lead to easy grinding like Viridian Forest being mostly just bugs for Charmander to use Ember on indefinitely, I think it was just a happy coincidence. This feels backed up by the fact later games don't really use this kind of design. I wouldn't even say Pokemon games have gotten easier. Sure, there's a lot of changes to make them less tedious, but we have just gotten older and played a lot more harder games. That is where a lot of the issues with Pokemon difficulty lies. You can find strong moves that have high accuracy and spread them across your team evenly. There isn't a sense of strategy development like other more fleshed out RPGs might require of their players. There is one hidden menu item I wish was talked about more within the tutorials of the game. Hidden deep in the settings is two battle mode types: Switch and Set. Switch is the default type. It lets you see what Pokemon is coming up next and you can change them out accordingly. Set doesn't give you that luxury of resetting the momentum of fights in your favor, instead forcing you to face whatever comes next. This is the closest thing Pokemon has to difficulty scaling, and such a small change can make a huge difference to how you approach battles. I just wish it was more. A very conscious choice that's worked in its favor was aiming the games towards kids. It is the smarter move. It's a much larger fanbase that can easily learn basics of game mechanics while capturing and collecting their teams. So in response to this lack of difficulty, a movement from the audience that grew older and more tired of an easy experience was born: the Nuzlocke community. I'm sure most of you know what a Nuzlocke is, but here's a very quick summary. You can catch the first Pokemon you find in a new area, and no more, forcing a hopefully diverse team of creatures you might not normally use. And if one of your partners faints, they're considered dead, and you must release them or put them in a box forever. These are how the original 2010 rules were written on 4chan's video game board in a comic by author Nick Franco. The name Nuzlocke comes from the creator's own partner named Nuzlocke, a Nuzleaf whose namesake was John Locke from Lost. I remember intently following Franco's first few comics when they were coming out and becoming obsessed with the idea, even trying it for myself before quickly finding the message boards created around his idea, becoming engrossed in everyone's stories of triumph and heartbreak at the victories and losses with their found teams. Nuzlockes are still increasingly popular today, with animated videos on YouTube to popular Twitch streams. The rule sets can take many forms, from not using items in battle, only using each Pokemon Center once, to even capping the levels of Pokemon before each gym. What makes this idea so appealing is its flexibility and lack of in-game settings. It requires players to determine the rules for themselves. If you say it's a Nuzlocke and use the original rules, then whatever you do after, it is yours to do as you see fit. And if you cheat, well, maybe only you will know, and also who cares? If there was a hard set of rules within a Pokemon game, that would dictate how a run will go. It would deflate the flexibility the community around Nuzlockes had come to harbour. I know there has been a cry from a section of Pokemon's community to make this a staple within the games themselves, but it's honestly just not feasible to create so many different kinds of hard rules that people are constantly thinking up for themselves that make their own Nuzlocke runs unique to them. This idea of a self-imposed run isn't for everyone. It can be tough to either stick to the rules if you get caught out unprepared, or maybe you just want to catch whatever you find without having to think about if it's your first time in an area or not. So I understand the frustration that Pokemon games are too easy, but one of the hardest things is realizing that something might not just be for you anymore. As much as I have grown up with Pokemon, gone through the waves of pure 90s obsession to early 2000s edgy hatred in favor of things like Dragon Ball Z, which were way cooler, then back around to think it's cool again in high school, the thing that really put my love of the series into overdrive was the competitive scene. Just prior to 2009's release of the Heart Gold and Soul Silver remakes, me and my flatmates were living and working on a kiwi fruit orchard. Long hours spent in the fields during the day and a lot of downtime at night meant we had a lot of time talking to each other about something we all loved, Pokémon. As we dove deeper and deeper into it, we discovered some of the more hidden designs of Pokémon, mainly nature breeding and egg moves. So, when it came time for the Gen 2 remakes to come out, we each had a team of 6 pre-prepared for the endgame battling amongst ourselves. With the Wii game No One Remembers Battle Revolution, we were able to connect our DS's wirelessly and battle with pretty nice graphics on screen. It was a lot of fun scheming teams and seeing who was the best. Then an outsider came along. She had been playing Pokemon like this much longer than us, and despite me having type advantages on some of her Pokemon, I kept getting destroyed. I didn't understand what I was doing wrong. That's when she told me about EV training as well as IV breeding, and a new obsession began. This idea of hidden layers of Pokemon became so deeply ingrained in something I already loved that now I beeline every Pokemon game I buy just to get to the end so my actual playtime can start. Playing Video Game Championship or VGC online. VGC rule sets change every year, but one thing remains the same. It's double battles requiring a team of 6 but only choosing 4 to fight. What Pokemon and held items are and aren't allowed changes every year, but this format is honestly so compelling. Right from the team select screen, mind games of what will and won't be picked can begin. Do you counterpick who you think your opponent will choose? Or have they already planned for your counter so you have to think even further ahead? It's honestly a lot of fun and has led to some of my favorite pro gaming moments like Sejong Park, not only using his favorite Pokemon Pachirisu, but winning the 2014 championships with it. There's a lot of other rule sets out there, like Smogon's tier lists, but VGC for such an official thing from Pokemon is generally really well handled. The barrier to entry for this kind of comp play has been getting increasingly lower as each generation passes. From EV training minigames that can have a Pokemon battle ready in a matter of minutes rather than hours and hours of grinding the same Pokemon over, to an acknowledgement of IVs making that breeding process easier. Personally, I like that there's some kind of wall there. Having my ass handed to me by a friend who had a fully trained team felt like a real shonen moment in my life. It made me realize there was a lot more depth to what I once thought was an incredibly shallow experience. If you're someone who thinks maybe Pokemon is too easy, give the online VGC scene a go. Maybe you'll find a newly ignited love like I did. Before wrapping this up, I think it's important to talk about the latest entry in the series. While I did enjoy my time in Galar, I have had nothing compelling me to my post-game save. Generation 8 is a problem of Pokemon being an annualized franchise. Even though a mainline game is every 2 or so years, there's always something coming out. Or in the case of 2021, 3 whole games. Switching from the 3DS with existing framework and expectations to a full home console with such a tight turnaround on making a new engine, new models, rigging those onto existing animations is harder than you think. All while designing a new region, variants, story, characters, and Pokemon led to some significant corners being cut. Rough cutscenes where there's no turn animations, or even just drawings with text in places. It's more than just, oh look at the Oblivion trees. The 7th gym could have been something special, with the removal of Gigantamax, but it lacked any audio mixing whatsoever. So this massive punk rock concert imitating 70s UK dive bars shows was incredibly awkward. I can't be too hard on Game Freak though. As much as the games would have benefited from a delay, it just wasn't feasible from the Pokemon Company's business standpoint. If you delay the flagship game, then you need to put a delay on everything. Merchandise, trading cards, anime, manga, and so on. Pushing back one game significantly hurts the bottom line of a company that big, so of course it was a rushed project. It's a massive shame it had to be like this, but at the end of the day I get it, that's just how capitalism is. No amount of Twitter bombing, YouTube comments, and especially death threats to developers is going to change how they operate an over $100 billion company, mainly one who produced one of the most successful games on the Switch to date. Is it okay not to like it? Of course. I think everyone familiar with the series felt a sense of disappointment, but I just hope with a little bit of time now, the framework is there, Generation 9 can bring us what Galar should have been. The future of the franchise is both the easiest thing in the world to predict and the hardest. It's easy because the games have largely stuck to the same formula for over 2 decades now. Saying they will go elsewhere in terms of the mainline series feels like a losing bet. On the other hand, I personally want to see it grow into more than what it is. Despite a love of online competitive play and scratching the itch of a challenge with Nuzlocking, there's a lot more that could be done even within the confines of an 8-gym and world-ending organization. It just feels like the community is picking the wrong battles to fight, so the push for change is not something I am willing to stick my neck out for. At least, not yet. Outside of the series' regular games, things like Ranger, Snap, and Mystery Dungeon offer a lot of variety with creatures we've all grown to love. Even Legends Arceus looks like a great game, putting a new spin on an old classic. Pokémon as a franchise has grown too big for its own good. The fanbase is so scattered across so many different generations, it's hard to decide a path it should take. But as long as the communities within it are willing to experiment with the mechanics themselves, and there's always new generations of kids growing up falling in love like we all did, we'll see it continue for many years to come. I know there is a lot of kickback to later games, especially Sword and Shield, but I think we forget every new generation is some child's first Pokemon game. My nephew was 7 years old when I brought my Switch around to my sister's house after I needed to crash with her for a few weeks. He had heard of Pokemon and knew Ash and Pikachu and a few random others like Charizard, Mewtwo, and Greninja, but outside of that, he knew nothing about what Pokemon actually was. As he watched me play, either standing in awe if it was on the big screen or looking over my shoulder when it had to be handheld, it reminded me a lot of my first curiosities with the franchise. Leaning over kids' shoulders on the bus to get even a glimpse at their screens, dreaming of the day I could begin my own adventure. Eventually, I made him his own save file, and let him run free within the region of Galar. I remember being hesitant at first. Did I really want this generation to be his first one, when the others are so special? But as he explored, captured, and grew with his team, it hit me that even if the surface of the games change, the heart is always there, and it's the reason Pokemon is still so big today. Catching iconic creatures to battle, hang out with, and become partners in a grand adventure together. That idea hasn't been captured to the same extent by any copycats, be it design, simplicity of RPG elements, or the spirit of competition with your rival. Every new generation of Pokemon is just that, the chance for a new generation to experience their very first adventure with their own team. This is an idea I and a lot of others have grown jaded to. It's perfectly fine to criticize what this series has become, but it does bear remembering at times just who the target demographic is at the end of the day. It's the kids who still dream of big adventures unclouded by the realities of real life that really push the limits of our imaginations that are strongest when we're young. Pokemon is one of the hardest franchises I've ever had to talk about, just like the core games themselves. On the surface, it seems like an easy task, but as you dig deeper, there's 1,000 layers underneath. So picking one part to talk about was a seemingly impossible task, which is why I want to give a shout out to Foxcade, who also recently released his own take on the idea. If you'd like to see Pokemon covered from some different perspectives, please check his video out. Hey, late night editor Mitch here. I just finished up the video and wanted to quickly say, if you're here, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, why not consider subscribing? And more importantly, I want to give a quick shout out to King K, for whom this video wouldn't have been possible. After my old PC died, I lost a lot of Pokemon footage and didn't really have the energy to record around 8 games worth of stuff, so if some of the footage looked familiar to you, that's why. Also, why there's just a lot of early game footage in there. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed a look at Pokemon, and hopefully I'll see you on the next one.